In order to make important choices in our lives and our societies, we need information. We need to know what rights we have. We need to know how our communities are run. We need to know how our countries are run.
Information is power. People have to realize that without information, they will never be able to better their lives. All of us, we want a better life. A better life, particularly for the ordinary people.
If we want to have access to housing, water, health, and any other public services as citizens, we need access to information.
Without this right, most other rights cannot be exercised. If you do not have access to information, you cannot make decisions. If you don't know where the hospital is, you cannot go there to get treated. If you don't know how to request something, you cannot access public services.
Meet Gundu Sila. She lives in Tambacounda, the southeastern region of Senegal.
I was a teenager when I got fistula. I had to leave the countryside to come to town.
Fistula is an injury that causes women to lose control of their bladder or bowels or both as a result of long or difficult childbirth. What many affected women might not know is that today the condition is mostly preventable and curable. But without access to that information, women like Gundu end up being marginalized and isolated. She lost twins and her husband left her. Since, however, she has received treatment.
I feel so much better now. Thanks to God, I got treatment and now I'm healed. Before, I felt terrible and I was tired of being sick. Now I'm more confident and people accept me. I feel healthy.
It is a challenge that can be corrected by simple surgery. But for lack of information, women have been forced to bear this very challenging condition in closed spaces because they do not know what to do. Passing to them information that this condition can be changed, and it is a basic right that they ought to get in terms of reproductive health. We've seen that change in Kenya, in Senegal, where they've been given information and corrective surgeries have been made.
When Ramatulai Ba learned how early marriage and early pregnancies can lead to obstructed deliveries and fistula, she and her husband decided to call off the wedding of their 13-year-old daughter, even if early marriage was an integral part of cultural practices.
Article 19 gave us information and made us think. So we allowed our daughter Fatoumata to continue her studies. Her father and I discussed it with the family, and we decided to give her the freedom to study and find a job. We stopped talking about her wedding.
Donc, grâce à l'accès à l'information, on a pu noter aujourd'hui.
Thanks to access to information, many practices changed. People did not know about the dangers of early marriage, but thanks to information, they changed their practices. We banned early marriage, we banned genital mutilation, and many other practices.
On a banni les mutilations génitales et tant d'autres.
In Cape Town, South Africa, we found another example of how information can improve people's lives and how people access important basic services. This is Blikkiesdorp, an informal settlement or temporary relocation area next to the airport. With the help of the Open Democracy Advice Centre, ODAC, and the Right to Know campaign, the inhabitants use the South African Access to Information law to find out about their situation and the plans the city has for them.
They have been told by the city that they are going to be provided houses where they are staying, where the settlement is. However, they've also heard that the airport, which owns the land where they are, is actually planning to expand the runway, which means they're going to be moved. So there's this confusion about, are we staying, are we going? If we're going, where are we going? Who's going to qualify to be allocated houses?
At the beginning, they said it was a temporal housing. Up until I've been living here, up until to 8 years now, from the information they gave it to us now. Now I know I was not supposed to be here by now.
I would say to have information, access to information is very, very important. Because if we didn't know about this realignment, nothing would even ever happen. You see, SATU would have just come in and just kicked us out. You see, that's what they normally do. You see, so I think for information, and that's why every bit and piece of information that we are getting is so valued to us.
For the first time in 8 years, they came and explained the whole process of the airport runway and where people will be moved to, and the conditionalities of who qualify for housings or who do not qualify. I think because of NGOs that are working in partnership with the Committee of Blakiston, we have managed to bring some level of awareness to the community and for them to understand their constitutional rights with regards to houses.
We need information to know about the programs that our governments offer and how they plan to solve our problems. And the government needs to know if their programs are working effectively. We need to be able to access, receive, and send information. Therefore, constitutions in most African countries protect freedom of expression. Access to information is closely linked.
They're, tied together, joined at the hip. If you don't have access to information, you have no ability to form an opinion, or at least to form an informed opinion. You have no ability to participate in public debate in an informed way.
When people have information, they can begin to engage governmental processes more effectively. They can make better choices about who leads them and what their priority issues are and what resources are available. So it's very good for governance. It's very good for creating participatory democracy, which is something a lot of us haven't experienced in many countries. We just go through this ritual of elections, and the next election we have government officials or politicians come to talk to us again, but in between elections there's no engagement.
For real development, we need to be able to follow up on whether government keeps the promises their representatives made to us during elections, and to monitor how they spend public money and other resources.
You need to know what decisions are being made on your behalf. You need to know resources, how much resources are being used on your behalf. There are lots and lots of things that you're entitled to as an ordinary citizen from your government, and without information, you simply would not know what you're entitled to. You simply would not know when things are going wrong.
For me, there are two main drives, and they exist together, and they're both necessary. And the one is to advance the call for access to information laws in countries, and the other is at the same time to advance for the proactive release of information through open data. And those two have to exist together, I think, because they are both the mechanisms by which we will get enough information to engage properly with our government. And if people don't have that information, they can't be the active citizens we need them to be. And we know to get the kind of democracy and development we deserve, active citizenry is necessary.
Sometimes local governments will understand, or local councils understand, that actually it's in their benefit if they give out accurate information, because it clears up a lot of confusion around issues that they're being held accountable for.
On the one hand, information helps us to hold our governments accountable, but with information we can also help the government to hold service providers or contractors accountable.
If you have access to information on how much money has been taken to a local municipality to build roads, you're able to ensure that the roads are well done and efficiently, which saves the country a lot of money for repairs, meaning that money is able to be put into education, it's able to be put into health, and the whole country then changes. Development happens and we can all witness it. But without access to information, the thinking that we can develop and develop in secrecy, I think is not going to happen.
Sometimes governments are apprehensive, and their apprehension at times is misplaced, because if they proactively make information available to the public, then they will find that there's nothing to fear, because most of our governments do a lot of work but people do not know about the work that they do, about the services that people can access, simply because information is not made proactively available. So what we are advocating for is to encourage and urge governments to just make information proactively available as and when they have it.
In recent years, the number of African countries with access to information laws has increased from 5 countries in 2008 to 17 by 2015. However, we are still a far cry from an ideal situation.
You still have more than 2/3 of the countries on the continent not having access to information laws. Put in another way, you have citizens in more than 2/3 of the countries in Africa not having a right of access to information. If we want to do a country-by-country campaign for adoption, it's going to be much longer, much more difficult, much more expensive. So we're sort of looking for a shortcut. So can we have a regional instrument that applies in every country in Africa, whether you have a national law or not?
API is the African Platform on Access to Information. It's a continental initiative by a number of individuals and organizations who have a common interest and a vested interest in access to information.
The Working Group on the African Platform on Access to Information, or in short, the API Working Group, consists of representatives of 10 organizations from different African countries and regions: the Africa Freedom of Information Center, Article 19 East Africa, Article 19 West Africa, Highway Africa, the International Federation of Journalists, the Media Foundation of West Africa, the Regional Office of the Media Institute of Southern Africa, Media Rights Agenda, the Open Democracy Advice Center, and the African Editors Forum in partnership with FES Media Africa, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, and the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa. The working group drafted the API Declaration, which was adopted at a big international conference in Cape Town in 2011.
What sets API aside, and then subsequently the API Declaration, is that for the first time we are looking at access to information in all of its nuances. Access to information as a developmental right. And the API Declaration speaks about access to information and people living with disabilities, access to information and children, access to information and elections. So for the first time, collectively, you've got one declaration, one document that spells out what is access to information in Africa and what African organizations, institutions, governments, and people in general should organize themselves around.
The API Declaration was endorsed by the African Union through Resolution 222 in 2012, adopted by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and the Pan-African Parliament in the Midrand Declaration in 2013. The development and adoption of the API Declaration complemented other important processes, such as the development of the Model Law for Access to Information in Africa, adopted by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in 2013.
There were guidelines on access to information, and that those guidelines were not necessarily appropriate for the African context. That then gave us an idea of coming up with the model law on access to information. And under my auspices, we put together African experts who then started the process of drafting the model law on access to information.
All these efforts are meant to improve access to information in African countries.
Given the importance of this right, it is important to promote it on a continental level. At the same time, we need to promote the right to information on a national level, so that states pass access to information laws and implement them.
International and regional processes now acknowledge transparency and accountability as an integral part of development and give incentives for governments to pass and implement access to information laws. In fact, Article 9 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights guarantees freedom of information and is binding for African Union member states. The Declaration of Principles on Freedom of Expression in Africa further interprets the article.
Certainly one of the most vital things that we need to start doing to advance development is to advance access to information. And there's not broad awareness.
Aujourd'hui, le combat est plutôt engagé sur...
We are now engaging the United Nations, African Union, UNESCO, and other structures to adopt the model law, to support the API Declaration, and to recognize the 28th of September as the International Right to Information Day. So the working group is still the engine for the campaign.
The API group has actually taken the lead in terms of trying to promote global international recognition of the right to information, which I think is wonderful and a very, very important initiative. So they're pushing for official UN recognition of the 28th of September.
So this is the last leg of that process. We are in the process of lobbying the UN bodies, especially UNESCO, lobbying the African Union Commission, through the Heads of State Summit, to see that Africa is able to say we are not lagging behind, we are able to mobilize the world into observing this very important right.
It is important for us to set aside one day out of the year to conclusively look at how we have progressed with respect to access to information, how the development processes in our respective countries are progressing, and to what extent access to information is facilitating that. That's why it would ideally provide a day, as I said, for everyone to get together around the singular issue. And it would certainly take the debate on access to information, again, in its various forms, and make it a global debate.
There are countries that are doing extremely well. They've opened up their systems legislatively in the rest of the world as much as in Africa, and there are those that keep trying to close, to tie the knots and close the, tighten the space. Overall, I think Africa is making great progress, and all of the stakeholders, especially in civil society, just have to be alert and speak up against those who try to reduce and not expand that space.
All stakeholders need to participate in improving access to information. As members of civil society, it is crucial that we collaborate and promote mutual understanding of the important role access to information plays in advancing general human rights.
That is why we have now reached a point where it is no longer only about abstract concepts. We aim at making the ordinary person aware of the importance of access to information. What access to information means to a person in terms of health, education, local governance, when he or she needs to vote. It is about how we make the importance of access to information understandable to the ordinary citizen.
Donc, c'est des questions. C'est comment rendre la question de l'accès à l'information accessible aux citoyens ordinaires.
As advocates and members of civil society, we might have to break down how accountability and transparency benefit the different stakeholders we are trying to engage with, such as the general public or parliamentarians.
If you want to do your work, whether you want to propose legislation, you want to propose a resolution, you want to find out the track record of somebody who has acted in one government office and is being appointed to the other, you need information. The only way you can get this information is by using an access to information law. If, as an individual parliamentarian, you go to a public institution and say, I want this or that, they will ignore you. And many of them confirm that, yes, in reality, that is the situation.
One of the ways that civil society organizations can kickstart the process of getting an access to information law is to participate in the initial drafting. Now that there are good examples that you can use and standards such as the African model law, this can make the process easier.
We have now more countries. From the 5 countries that had passed access to information law when we began, we now have 16 countries. A number of them have modeled their laws around the model law. Recently, in fact, the latest being Mozambique, and South Sudan.
To pass an access to information law in Nigeria and later in Liberia and Sierra Leone, civil society engaged with parliamentarians. Every single parliamentarian was contacted to ensure that every one of them was aware of the lobbying campaign for an access to information law, why it was important, and how they could help in getting it passed. At the same time, different civil society actors and the public were engaged at all levels to build a mass movement.
Now, I believe that if that can be pulled off in a huge country like Nigeria, with its size and population, it should be a piece of cake to do it in Namibia, in Botswana, because those are much smaller countries. Okay, I know that civil society is also much smaller in those countries than they are in Nigeria. But really, I think ultimately it's easier to engage a relatively small number of parliamentarians.
Effective access to information systems, including laws, improve relations between citizens, government, and civil society organizations. Therefore, access to information facilitates and accelerates development.
The people who bear the brunt of lack of services and lack of information are ordinary people in our villages, in the rural communities. And I would like to urge civil society organizations to concentrate on empowering our rural communities to enable them to exercise their right to know. It is a right, if properly enjoyed, can change the lives of ordinary people.